Welcome to the Chromperfect Beginner Training Series. This is Section 2, Chapter 2. In the previous chapter, we introduced the core file types used by Chromperfect. In this chapter, we focus on two of the most important, the raw data file and the bound data file. Understanding the difference between these two file types is critical because it directly affects how you store, review, archive, and defend your analytical results. Instinctively, new users often gravitate toward using raw files as their primary working and archive format. In almost every case, this is a mistake and can create serious problems later. Let's begin with the fundamentals. What is a data file? A data file consists of two essential data sets. The first is the header information. This contains acquisition data such as sampling rate, runtime, etc., and sample identification information, such as instrument name, operator name, etc. The header also documents the method file used to process the data. Some of this data is editable in the Chromperfect raw file editor, and some is non-editable. An example of a data file header is shown on screen now. The second dataset is the detector response. Conceptually, you can think of this as a two-column spreadsheet, time versus response. Within the method file, there is a sampling rate setting. This tells the acquisition service how frequently to capture data from the detector. For example, if sampling is set to 1 point per second, every second of the run produces one recorded time value and one detector response value. If that sampling rate is changed to 2 points per second, all future data files will contain twice as many data points. However, this does not alter any previously acquired data. Once a run is complete, the captured signal is fixed. You can see this directly inside Chromperfect. In the analysis program, you can enable the option to show data points as dots, which visually reveals each individual sample on the chromatogram. You can also open the file in the raw file editor and see the numeric time versus response values listed directly. This makes it clear that a chromatogram is not a continuous curve, but a series of discrete sampled data points. This time versus response data represents the original captured signal, and it is stored in both a raw file and a bound file. In order for the user to interact meaningfully with this data, it must be processed. Processing is controlled primarily by the method file and calibration file. A formatted report may also be generated using a format file. The fundamental structural difference between a raw file and a bound file is this. A raw file always processes the data using the external method file referenced in its header. A bound file processes the data using an internal copy of the method file, calibration file, and associated processing state that are stored inside the file itself. This seemingly small structural difference is extremely significant. Consider a real-world scenario. Bob runs a sample in a busy production laboratory. He completes the analysis and prints a report. Later, Sarah improves the method file. She adjusts integration settings, modifies display options, and updates the calibration file. Sometime later, a customer inquiry requires Bob to review his original data. He opens the raw file and the chromatogram looks different. More importantly, the calculated results are no longer the same. Nothing has happened to the signal. The difference is that the raw file is now being processed using the updated external method and calibration files. Fortunately, Bob also created a bound file at the time of the original analysis. When he opens the bound file, everything appears exactly as it did when the report was first generated. A bound data file creates a processing snapshot. It contains the original raw signal, along with an internal copy of the method file, calibration file, and report configuration that were used at the time it was created. When you open a bound file, Chromperfect still processes the data. The difference is that it processes using the internal method and calibration stored inside the bound file, not the external files that may have been modified later. That is why a bound file consistently reproduces the same interpretation, even if the working method or calibration files have changed. The bound file provides stability, traceability, and long-term reproducibility. It ensures that even years later, when supporting method files may have changed or been deleted, the analysis can still be recreated exactly as originally reported. This illustrates the inherent limitation of raw data files. If you change integration settings in the method file and reprocess a raw file, the results will change. The underlying signal remains the same, but the interpretation changes. A typical workflow is straightforward. Acquire a raw data file. A corresponding bound file is automatically created. Open the bound file. Review and adjust integration if necessary. Confirm calibration. Generate reports. Rebind your file. After acquisition, your bound file is the primary record. Although raw data may be retained for compliance purposes, it is generally redundant once a bound file has been created. One final practical advantage. Because a bound file contains the method file, calibration file, and format configuration internally, sharing data with colleagues or Chromperfect support is significantly simpler. Everything required to reproduce the analysis is contained within a single bound file. To summarize, a raw data file is the original captured signal combined with external interpretation rules. A bound data file is the captured signal plus the internalized method, calibration, and stored interpretation used to generate the results. Neither file changes acquisition parameters after the fact. Processing settings influence interpretation, not the captured signal. Understanding this distinction prevents confusion when results appear to change after method adjustments. If you are working with a raw file, recalculation based on the current external method is expected. If you are working with a bound file, results remain consistent because the internal method and calibration are preserved. Congratulations! You have completed Section 2, Chapter 2. In the next chapter, we will examine what a method file really controls and clarify which settings affect acquisition and which affect interpretation and reporting. If you enjoyed this video, please click the like button, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell icon so you are updated when we upload new videos. For more information or to reach out to our team, please visit www.chromperfect.com.